Hey, everybody. I'm Jack Hammer. Welcome to tonight's episode of Niner Chatter, where we go ahead and get you guys all fired up and into the discussion. You guys get to have your voice heard with the discussion of 49ers football. A lot going on in 49er kingdom tonight. We've got injuries in training camp. We've got all kinds of different position battles that are going to be going on that we want to chat about as well. Julio Jones isn't going to be a 49er. Lots of different things to get to. We've got Amin over here in the chat. How you doing, Amin? And I see Nick as well. So, let's go ahead and get those calls rolling in as we go through. Just a couple of things. News broke first thing this morning that Tarvarius Moore and Justin Skule are both going to be out for likely the full season. Moore with a torn Achilles tendon and Justin Skule with a ACL tear. Both those, like I said, likely going to be season-ending injuries, although there is some preliminary word that Moore may be able to make it back before the end of the season, but I would say that's going to be highly doubtful. Interesting here, piece of this, 49ers are lucky that they have a lot of depth at these positions. Moore wasn't going to be a starter, neither was Skule, but they both had positions that were going to be vital to depth. When you look at it before, it was going to be Skule was probably going to be in a battle with Jalen Moore and Sean Coleman for the swing tackle spot. So that battle is going to likely now just take Skule out of the picture. So it looks like it's going to be really between Jalen Moore, Sean Coleman. You may even see Daniel Brunskill, who was going to be battling for that right guard position with Aaron Banks, become a part of that battle as well. So, and then at the safety spot, you're losing Tarvarius Moore, key special teams guy as well. But there's a lot of depth there. You've got Marcel Harris, who can fill that position. We've seen him do that in the past. He can fill in on special teams. They drafted Talanoa Hufanga, once again, a special teams guy who that's primarily going to probably be his role for this year. I'm not sure about his ability to replace Moore at the safety spot. In the film breakdowns that I did with Hufanga and the one that I actually posted with Grant a few weeks ago, I mentioned it quite a few times where it looks like Hufanga is more of a linebacker than a safety. And especially with the way that the 49ers utilize their safeties, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to be the guy that really fills in for Moore with what they're looking for there. But also one last name, and they just signed him yesterday. Tony Jefferson will be, he's going to be a safety as well, and he'll be able to fill in for Moore. Jefferson's only 29. He tore his ACL in 2019, sat out last year. But before that, he really was a guy who hadn't had very many injuries throughout his career. So, again, that's kind of where it shakes out. So, really tough break with Moore and with Skule. And hey, Eva, I see you over there, Twisted Diva, and Josh. Let's go. If you guys want to call in, the link's here. Let me drop it again for you guys so that you can, so that it's there for you. Let's see a couple other topics. We can go through some. What are some things that encourage you for 2021? What are some things that you're really excited to see out of the 49ers in 2021? Why you're looking forward to this season? If you want to take the negative route, go ahead and we can talk about some of the things that you might be concerned about. Hey, Raymond, good to have you on here. So that's another topic that we can discuss. Last week, if you might recall that Bay Area Baller called in and he kind of put me on the spot with the wide receiver position, wanting to get my take on who the 6 wide receivers were going to be that were going to make the final roster. I actually used that as part of an article that I wrote yesterday for All 49ers SI. This week I kind of like to say, how do you guys think the tight end position is going to shake out behind George Kittle? We know Kittle's going to be the starter. The 49ers have made done a lot of looks elsewhere to kind of fill that tight end role. They have Kittle and, of course, Ross Dwelley, everybody's favorite tight end, the people's tight end, Ross Dwelley. They got a couple other guys as well. So, what do you think in there? Charlie Warner is a guy that they drafted last year to be a blocking tight end. It looks like they may have replaced him already with the player that they picked up from from Tennessee. So Michael Pruitt. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. There were some questions on Trey Lance early on, but he seems to kind of straighten that out last week. I think it might have been a little bit of original, that first practice jitters, maybe getting to him that first time in front of the media. That could have been part of there. So lots of different things that we could talk about. Obviously, 49ers missed out on Julio Jones. I'd like to get your thoughts on that tonight if we can as well. That one kind of makes a little bit of sense, and I can break that one down for you real quick. The Julio Jones thing, the reason I think that the 49ers missed out on Julio Jones is really they weren't going to go to the first-round draft pick. And the Atlanta Falcons, they wanted to move him, but they didn't want him to be in the NFC. And they definitely didn't want to trade him to the NFC West. They didn't want to have Julio Jones be playing for the 49ers, the Seahawks, or the Rams, three of the better teams in the NFC, three teams that they're likely to probably have to face if they get to the playoffs. And I really do think that Atlanta has a pretty good team. They drafted the tight end out of Florida, so that's a big plus for them. And they were a team that was close last year. To winning a lot of games, they had a lot of games where they were up and they just blew it. And I think you look at that and they went ahead and they made the coaching change. That was part of the reason for their change there. So I think the Falcons are actually going to be a team that envisions themselves as a playoff team, and that's why they don't want to have Julio Jones go to the NFC. So for the 49ers to do that, it would have taken a first-round pick if it was the 49ers, Seattle, or the Rams. I have a feeling that it was going to be a first-round pick that it was going to take to pull him over to a team in the NFC. 49ers, they made that trade for Trey Lance, and because of that, they don't have a first-round draft pick again until they don't have it until 2024. So, that's not something they're necessarily going to think that would happen. So those are some of the different topics out there, like as I mentioned. The injuries, we could talk about the injury front, some of the things that are going on there, why that's happening, so on. Give me your thoughts on what you're encouraged by. I've seen a few of you guys dropping some things over in the comment section, but let's get you on here. Even if you don't want to show your face, that's fine. You can pull yourself up and just turn your camera off, and we can just hear your voice. That's fine. Probably a lot more fun listening to you guys talk than it is for you guys to just listen to me go on and on. But so if you guys get a chance to call in, I'd appreciate it. I see Monica over there in the chat section, and Graham. Graham saying that Julio Jones was right place, wrong time for us. I do agree. I just think the 49ers are. I would say this: Julio Jones, as far as saying it's the right place, that's not. I don't think so. When you consider the Falcons didn't want to keep him in the NFC, so I think that's why it went the direction that it did. So there's that one. I see Amin over here in the chat section. He's working the crowd, trying to get everybody to jump in on this and make some calls in. The link here, let me go ahead and give it to you one more time. There we go. Got a whole bunch of folks over here in the chat section. As far as the injuries go, let's talk about that. Let's go back to that just a little bit. And I'm going to reference a tweet that I had sent out earlier today. And in that tweet that I'd sent out, there's a lot of folks talking about the amount of games lost over really since 24. There was a tweet that had come out by somebody else stating, breaking down the number of games the 49ers players had missed since 2014. And that was really a way to show that it wasn't a Kyle Shanahan problem. And okay, but what you got to do is if you really go back and you look at it, it's I don't know if I'd say it's a Kyle Shanahan problem. It is a little bit, but it's also a John Lynch problem, and it's a Trent Baalke problem. If you go back to all the way back to 2005, 2008, the 49ers under their previous regime, even before Trent Baalke, they had Scott McCloughan. Scott McCloughan joined the 49ers in 2005. He was the VP of player personnel in 2005 through 2007. And then he went on to become the general manager in 2008 and held that role until he resigned in 2010, right before the draft. Even in 2010, he had helped set up the draft board for the 49ers that year as well. But when you go back, what's interesting, if you go back and you look at those teams that he built, specifically '08 through 10, so those 3 years, once again, he'd been in the organization for about 3 years prior, so he'd been in a player personnel role, so he was right there below the general manager role. Very Scott McCloughan, very high level as far as who he's bringing in. And then the 3 years after once he became the general manager from 2008 to 2010, the 49ers ranked 6th. They had the 6th fewest games lost due to injury. And that carried over into 2011, and it carried over into 2012 when Jim Harbaugh and Trent Baalke were in charge. In both 2011 and 2012, the 49ers didn't have a lot of injuries. They were again, I think it was 2012, they were first as far as the fewest games lost due to injury, and the year before that they were still under, inside the top 10. So were doing very well until 2013, and that's when you really kind of see the worm turn a little bit there. And that's when Trent Baalke's influence on the team, having been in the quasi GM role for the draft portion of 2010, and then beyond that, you started to see the players that he was picking, and we've seen it kind of carry on, where he's picking guys that are a little bit more risk factors as far as injuries and things like that, guys coming off of ACLs, guys, free agents that are coming off of injuries and things like that, or with injury history. And so, that's part of the deal there. I think that's part of kind of carried on. You saw John Lynch had to take some injuries early on in 2017, trying to rebuild the team. When they took over, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they really had to rebuild it up. So, we've continually seen the injuries be a factor for the 49ers. So it's a rough one there. So, outside of that, let's go ahead and take a look a little bit here at the, some things I asked you guys what you're encouraged by. So if you guys can, decide that you want to jump in, that'd be something I'd love to hear. What you're encouraged by for this year. I understand that it might be a little hard right now because of the injuries that we just sustained, the 49ers did, but as mentioned earlier, as bad as those are, fortunately it was not for one of the starter players. I feel bad for Moore and School, both those guys, especially Moore. Moore's going into a contract year. That's a rough one for him. School has been a guy who he's always been in that backup role. There's been times when he's played that he's done well. There's times where he's really struggled. He's a decent backup tackle. He is going to struggle when he takes on speed rushers, but other than that, he holds his own, and that backup role he handles pretty well. So it's going to be really tough to see how that all works out. So looks like we have somebody that wants to join finally.
Hey,
Raymond. How you doing,
Jack? I'm doing good.
I'm good. What's going on?
All right, so just want to get off the subject of the injuries for a little bit.
Sweet.
It's depressing. So, all right, so looking at this season, if we're looking at the rookie class, besides Aaron Banks and possibly Trey Sermon, who do you see actually pushing for a starting position?
I think you're going to look at Aaron Banks is going to be, Banks is definitely the guy who I think is going to be pushing for the starting spot along the offensive line, right? I think, it's going to be Banks and it's probably going to be Banks and Brunskill. Those are your guys that you're looking at right guard. But I really think that you're looking at Banks being the guy that's going to win that out. Along the front, the offensive line there, you've got Williams at left guard, Tomlinson at left guard, Williams at left tackle, Mack at center. Banks will be your starting right guard, and then you've got McGlinchey out at right tackle. And I think McGlinchey is going to see we're going to see a little bit of a resurgence from him hopefully this year, if that right guard spot can stay healthy and stay with one guy. I think he really struggled last year having that round table of guys next to him, just kind of switching in and out all the time. So I think we're going to see him step up a little bit. How about yourself? What do you think that is going to happen there?
On the offensive line?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Aaron Banks can push for that position, the starting position. like you said, I think the revolving door and at right guard, but also the center position. So you look at the center and the right guard position next to McGlinchey. It's been very inconsistent, and I know Trent Williams played really good last year. Lakin played decent, has his ups and downs, of course. But when I look at the offensive line, I think the continuity across the offensive line is usually it's understated, underestimated how important it is to have a starting five from training camp into the season actually be able to play together. I know last year we had Hronis Grasu starting at center.
You had Grasu at center a few times for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think the offensive line will be a lot better this year. Now, I know at the safety position, looking at Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tart. One thing I was interested in, I keep hearing a lot of people talk about the big nickel, maybe even a big dime. And so with getting, Tony Jefferson in, I wonder if we'll see that rotation where, because Tart, he can pretty much play interchangeably between free safety and strong. I wonder if we'll see Jimmy come more into the slot on some passing downs, or vice versa, see Jefferson play more at the strong safety position and throw Tart in the box. Or, even if Jefferson, I know he played in the box a lot in Arizona, so maybe we'll see that as well. But we got to see if Jefferson can keep a starting position, So, we'll see what happens, though. But, looking at the running back position now, I know losing Wilson, that's tough because I feel like last year was probably his best season so far. Having double-digit touchdowns, playing really well in some games where, the guy had 100-plus yards, touchdowns, and he had a really good, decent season for playing, I guess, the third running back role maybe. So we'll see how that goes. But I just wanted to get your take on some of these things, and thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, well, real quick while I got you on, I think, at the safety spot, I like what you're saying as far as, that the big nickel, because I think that is something that the 49ers like to use. When you go think back to 2019, there was a lot of times where they did that, and that's how Tarvarius Moore got onto the field, and that's why he was on the field and making that interception in the Super Bowl, is because they had him at free safety, and they had Jimmy Ward down at the slot, down inside, and I think they also had over on the other side inside they had the other safety. So that's something that I could see.
I think it was Marcel Harris. They had Harrison sometimes playing in the box. And that's Tony Jefferson, from everything I hear, is definitely a box safety. So I could see that role as well. That was one of the things we talked about. There was a lot of talk about that last year, right? When they brought in a couple of different safeties, how they were going to maybe run that big nickel. So, I think Fonga really fits that role really well. When you watch him on film, he looks like a linebacker. He looks like a linebacker that can play free safety. Yeah, I've watched your breakdowns of him. I think it was you and Grant did a breakdown of him, and that's what I came away with, was that he's not a safety you want to leave in space, but playing in that linebacker role, if he can put some weight on, get some experience, play more special teams this year most likely, but if he can get some time in there, it definitely seems like his game is suited for the box. He's really good on blitzing. Actually is a very instinctual player around the first 10 to 15 yards in terms of breaking on balls. So, I can see that.
Yeah, he does a really good job when the ball's if the play's in front of him of breaking. It's when he's got to try to turn and run with somebody where he struggles. So even if you stick him back as a high safety, but you get him back deep enough to where he keeps everything in front of him, I think he'd be okay. You just don't want him to have to be in a position where he needs to turn and run with the safety, because he's going to, or with a tight end or a running back, he's going to have trouble there. But I really appreciate you making the call. You had some really good points and some good questions there. I agree with you on Jeff Wilson too. Really quick, he had a terrific year last year. He kind of was a breakout guy. And so it's rough there, but they should have him back, I think, towards the end of the year, second half of the season. And they have enough depth, so I think the depth will pull them through at that spot. So we'll see how it turns out, but there's a lot to be looking forward to there. So again, thanks. It's great to see you. I've seen your name and your Twitter come through so many times. It's great to actually have a chance to chat with you. So I really appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
All right. Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. That was a great call. It's great to see. That's one of the fun parts about doing this is, I try to be active on Twitter, and I see a lot of you guys on there, the guys and gals on Twitter. So when we do these call-ins and you get to actually put a face to a name and a voice to it, it's nice. And then when you read some of these tweets, you can almost hear the conversation back and forth. So very good call there by Ray. Amin is very, very much working the crowd over here on the other side in the comment section. But yeah, so he raised some good points there as far as the big corner or the big nickel, even a big dime. That's one of the things where the loss of Moore, even though he's not a starter, is a big deal, and it could be a problem because you're starting to have a little bit less depth there. But I do think that Hufanga can fill that role pretty nicely as far as he's going to be a box safety, and I think Jefferson will as well. So, I'm going to pull this one up. Graham, got to call in. Even if you don't want to have your face on the screen, you can pull it up and just take it. So just turn your camera off. We can hear you. Here, if you want to call in, let me go. Sorry. Paste. Here's the link. Sorry about that. I should be putting that in there more often. Graham says, do you feel back in 2017 Saul wanted Eric Reed to be like Warner became or Azeez Al-Shaair? That's a really good question. That kind of goes back to the discussion that we were just having, right? As far as having that big box player, that's a safety kind of role. That's definitely, I think, the role that Saleh was looking for Eric Reed. That's what they did there. And so, again, I could see – that's where I can see Hufanga. So when I watch Hufanga play, he reminds me kind of like of a Reed type of a player. He's a big safety, big and strong guy who can become he's not going to take over Fred Warner, but the Azeez Al-Shaair role, that's the role that, Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, that type of linebacker, that's kind of the player that Hufanga is. And that makes sense. And Graham, I see there where you're saying that you're over in Australia and working. So, hey, don't get in trouble, but it's awesome to see that you're checking out the show while you're working. Hopefully, it's making your time go by a little bit faster. And I appreciate you, reaching out and shooting at that good question. And Raymond chimes in. Going back to the Eric Reed portion, Reed wasn't happy about that, and that's 100% right. Reed wasn't happy. Reed didn't seem like he was very happy for a lot of the last portion of his tenure in San Francisco. A lot of things going on there, but as far as being that role, he played it pretty well for a guy that had never really played a safety, but at least he was getting on the field. Otherwise, Reed, I don't think would have been out there. So it's pretty good there. So. We even got Steven over here from Australia. So the Niner chat are going global tonight. Caught a little bit of East Bay Chris, my fellow all 49ers person, definitely a personality and a guy that's full of some interesting takes and jokes and guy that just cracks me up. And he had some really good callers from across the pond last night on his show. So if you again, if you want to jump in, the link is over in the chat. But yeah, the injuries, this injury problem with the 49ers is just it stinks, and it's really one of those things where got to go back like I said earlier. The only benefit of today, and it's really a bummer for Moore and for school. Is that what happened today, I don't think really does anything is changing, doesn't really do anything as far as changing the win-loss record for the 49ers this year. I think that, it's rough on Moore because he was in a contract season. So we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. It might help the 49ers with retaining the services for next year if they decide to do that for 2022. So that's just it's a bummer for both those guys. It's a bummer for Jeff Wilson Jr. as well. But the key part when you look at the 49ers and we're talking about injuries, the key thing is you look through last year and all the injuries that the 49ers sustained up and down the roster. If Jimmy Garoppolo was just healthy, if they just had a quarterback that was healthy throughout the season, I think even with all the injuries that they sustained in 2020, they still could have squeaked into the playoffs towards, at the bottom end of the NFC. So, when you look at the 49ers this year, they're much more set up for success at the quarterback position, which is it really is the most important position on the field. You've got Jimmy Garoppolo, who we know can win games. I said this last week on the show when a couple of folks had mentioned Garoppolo. It's just he's a guy who when you watch him, he's very frustrating and challenging, and you get really upset with his play and the throws that he misses. But then for whatever reason, at the end of the game, he's able to hit a big one, and he's able to pull it out on the end. And also, this time if they go down, I feel much more comfortable having Trey Lance step in. He's the quarterback of the future anyway. So it looks like we got another one on here. I'm a little bit worried about this guy. He was really hard on me on Friday. Joe Montana is better than Tom Brady, but how you doing tonight, my man?
I'm good. I have a question. No problem, man. I gotta show support. You came on my channel, so I'm just getting the support back.
Yeah.
And also, I really enjoy doing this stuff, like going on Niner shows and just talking. So, but I have a question for you. What's one position that the Niners need to address before the season starts?
The one position that the 49ers need to address before the season starts that scares me the most is wide receiver. You look at that. You look at the wide receiver position, and outside of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, there really isn't anything else there. Yesterday I had wrote an article with my prediction for who the 6 receivers were going to be. But once you get past those 2, there's really not anything else out there. So it's rough. You're hoping that Jalen Hurd comes back. You're hoping that these guys. You're hoping that all these guys can do better than what they've shown, and that's really scary because hope is not a strategy, and that's this seems to be the strategy the 49ers are throwing out there when it comes to the wide receiver position. How about you? I think I've heard you mention quarterback quite a bit. Is that your spot, or where would you go?
My first is cornerback, only because right now, as it stands, I would say wide receiver. I would agree with you, mainly because let's look at Deebo Samuel. Let's break down all the receivers on the roster that we have, mainly. Deebo goes for it. Last year, he didn't even get injured going for extra yards like Kittle did. Kittle got injured on a play where he went for extra yards and tried to get the yak, and he got injured. Deebo, last year, none of his injuries were off yak, but he plays very physical. He's trying to get those extra yards, which makes him more likely to get injured. Ayuk already missed like 4 or 5 games last season. And then we have Jalen Hurd. Richie James is also injured. That's what I've heard. I think that's true. Richie James is also injured right now. Jalen Hurd hasn't played on the field for 2 years, and he already has like a torn ACL and all that. He's come off 2 injured seasons. And like our receiver core isn't that good. Like let's take out Deebo. If Deebo gets injured, Ayuk gets injured. Jalen Hurd probably not going to play this year. He has a history of not playing for us. He's the 3rd round draft pick, and he hasn't played the last 2 seasons. Richie James is injured at the moment. Our wide receiver core are one of the most injury-prone wide receivers. Our whole team is injury-prone. Not even just a wide receiver. So you guys have to go and get wide receivers because if those guys get injured, and Deebo is going to get injured, Ayuk's going to miss at least 3 games. And especially Deebo, because the way Deebo plays, he's a very physical guy. That makes him more likely to get injured. Jalen Hurd hasn't played for 2 seasons. Richie James is also injured right now. We don't know if he's going to be healthy the entire season. And some games he's not even active. Some games the Niners just won't make him active. So the Niners really need to address that wide receiver position because you can't play with no wide receivers on the field. You're not going to win games with practice squad receivers. You're just not. What Trey Lance needs is he can work with Deebo Samuel and Ayuk. He just can't work with practice squad receivers. You can't expect Trey Lance to win games with practice squad receivers. You can't even expect Jimmy Garoppolo to win with practice squad receivers. Look at a guy like Carson Wentz, where he had to play with practice squad receivers and he couldn't win games. And Carson Wentz is a way better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. More athletic. You might agree. You agree with that? Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah. I think he'll show that this year. I think with that coaching staff that he's going to be with this year, that he can that he'll show that he is. I think he took a step back the last couple of years, but I think that some of that had to do with the coaching staff as well, and as you mentioned, the talent around him. And I think what I wanted to say, kind of jump in, we have. You're right. They have Samuel and they have Ayuk, but even those two have a history of injuries, especially Deebo Samuel. Right? He's been injured quite a bit, and last year he was out quite often. Even Brandon Ayuk, for as great as he looks like he could become, has shown a history of injuries as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. But I do agree with you. I think the wide receiver position is one. I want to touch real quick on your cornerback position, because I agree with you there too. Jason Verrett, for as good as he was last year, that was a rough. That could possibly be a rough one. And so, what are your thoughts around that cornerback spot?
That cornerback spot needs to be addressed as sign a free agent, kind of like a guy like Rashad Breeland, or since you didn't trade for Julio Jones, offer the Patriots a second and a fourth for someone like Stephon Gilmore or J.C. Jackson. J.C. Jackson played really good last year. And the thing about, especially, there's teams that value the cornerback position where their division isn't even stacked with that many good receivers. Like, look at, the Packers. They value their cornerback position more than many teams that I know. They draft cornerbacks every year, at least in the first round, for, the past few years. They drafted Eric Stokes. They draft Darnell Savage, Jerry Alexander. They draft that cornerback position. And that division, look at the Lions wide receivers, not that good. Besides Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney, who's still trying to be better, but Allen Robinson is the only good threat on that team. And the Vikings, they play twice a year, but the Vikings also don't do good. Breeland and J.C. Jackson really need to we should sign Breeland, or we should trade for Gilmore, J.C. Jackson. Because look at the receivers, especially in the NFC West. DK Metcalf, DeAndre Hopkins. If another team had Deebo and Ayuk, I'm not that worried, right? If we had to replace a wide receiver group with someone else in the division, if we had Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods, I'm not that worried. But if we have the worst wide receiver core in division, and the division has guys like DK Metcalf, who killed us last year, a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who put up 140 yards against us first game of the season, he put up 140 yards against us. And even when the game that Verrett played against DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona, and he didn't do that bad, but that also depends on if Verrett is healthy. Because if Verrett's not healthy, who's going to guard DeAndre Hopkins? DeAndre Hopkins smokes us in general, but without Jason Verrett, he's going to smoke us even more.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in there. A couple of things that you said. Breeland, you brought up the Rashad Breeland, but he actually signed with somebody else earlier this week. So I don't remember who the team was that he went to, but he is off the board. As an option there, unfortunately. But your trade option would be a good one. And I think we might be underselling the rookies a little bit too. Both of them are pretty good as well, especially man coverage, and that's really where they struggled with Hopkins, right? In week one was he was just cruising through the zones, and we saw the difference when you took Richard Sherman out of the game. So it'll be interesting to see. If Ambry Thomas, I'm very comfortable with him. I just having watched him play, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to surprise people this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see him be able to come in and shadow a guy like Hopkins or somebody, chasing them around the field. He went up against all the best receivers that Alabama had to throw at him in 2019 and did a really good job against them. Really shut him down to the point where Alabama didn't even test him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And but I appreciate you reaching out and taking the call. And as I've told you before, if you want to do a show together at any point, you just give me a holler and we'll jump on your channel or mine and chat ball. Because one of the things I do like talking with you about is just like you showed on Friday, and that didn't bother me when you got me stuck there because I tried to argue with you and you had a perfect comeback for me. So anytime you want to chat ball, just let me know. Real quick while I got you on here, Jason reached out. He says, Ayuk's groin injury last year could have just been from tightness. He had mentioned that he was injured, but he doesn't have an injury history. And he's right. I might have misspoke there a little bit. Ayuk doesn't have a history of injury just that he was last year, but Deebo does. So
Deebo does.
Anyway,
but the thing about the rookie corners, like you said about Ambry Thomas and Yamada Lenoir, I like those guys, but let's look at last year, with even first round guys like Jeff Okudah. I know Jeffrey Okudah got injured, but even guys like AJ Terrell, they struggled, and they're first round cornerbacks. We have third and fifth round cornerbacks, and they have to go up against guys like DeAndre Hopkins and DK Metcalf and Cooper Kupp, and those are top 10. DK and D-Hop, you could argue, are top 15 receivers in the league. D-Hop could arguably, you could say he's one and number two. And D-Hop's easily a top 10, top 15 receiver in the league. DK is easily a top 10, top 15 receiver. So those rookie cornerbacks are definitely going to struggle against DeAndre Hopkins and DK Metcalf because they've been doing it. DK has only done it for 2 or 3 years, but DeAndre Hopkins has done it for like 10 plus years, and he's done it at a very high level with guys like Brian Hoyer and like those guys at quarterback. So
Sure.
I get your point about like the rookie cornerbacks, but they're gonna struggle year one. They're not gonna blow out of the park or go make Pro Bowls. They're gonna struggle year one. In the NFC West, they're gonna struggle even more because they're gonna have to go up against really, really good receivers.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it works out because the 49ers, if they have a good pass rush, it's going to help them out. So, it kind of goes hand to hand there. So if the 49ers pass rush comes back to the level it was in 2019, I think that's going to help out those corners and help those younger guys, maybe come along if they're called upon. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to jump on to, there's a couple of other folks that have joined that I'm going to go ahead and get to. It was a great call on me, and I really, like I said before, I really like chatting with you. So, whether you want to keep calling in on these or do a show together like we did on Friday, would love to do that with you and talk ball with you. Because one thing I like about Amin is that he has his opinions and he has really good points that back him up, and he isn't afraid to give you exactly what he thinks and tell you, see, told you were wrong, like he did to me on Friday, which was awesome. So you have a good night, and we'll talk to you down the road.
See ya.
All right, bye-bye. Hey, Nick, how's it going? Oh, you're muted. There you go. No, I can't hear you. You sound really weird. You sound like shoot. How about I jump over to another one? I'll come back to you. Varuna, how you doing? This was the original caller, and he's back.
Okay. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Yeah, it's been good. So, fine. Work is done for the day. So,
there you
just
go.
Me time. So today, since you have followed 49ers, I'm pretty sure for a very long time. So I have a question to ask you, like two-part question. Let's say, going back over the years, now any sports team that we have this concept of some teams that we think, okay, they should have achieved more, they should have won the championship. So in 49er teams in the past, can you name one year, a team that you think should have achieved more, but for some reason, maybe injuries or any other things that underachieved, in your opinion?
Muted. It helps if I don't have my mic on mute, right? But yeah, as you're talking through that, the one that jumps to my mind right away would be the 1987 49ers. So this is going way back, but the 1987 49ers were that was the year of the strike, but they were a really good team. They were 13-2, best record in the NFL. Putting up huge points week after week, and they got to the playoffs and just fell flat on their faces in the divisional round, the first playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings, and got eliminated there. That was kind of the game that also set off, more than anything, the Joe versus Steve controversy, because Steve Young replaced him at one point in the game as it was down, and kind of seemed like he might bring him back for a short period of time. So that was probably the one team that really greatly underachieved, was that 1987 team, because they had the ability to get to the Super Bowl and really blew it. The one thing about that 87 team, though, is there was really a young team. It had some veterans. It had Joe Montana, obviously, and Roger Craig, and Jerry Rice was only in his, I think, third season at that point. And they had a really terrific draft in 1986. So those guys were those guys from the draft class in '86 were coming along, and that's really what you saw. That's why you saw them 88, 89, 90 have that run that they went on, and so that's the one for me. Another one, real quick, is Raymond mentions the 1990 49ers in the chat. The reason I don't bring that one up is because they got to one step. They were 15 seconds away from, or about 2.5 minutes, I guess it was, away from going to the Super Bowl before the Craig fumble at the end of the game. So those are a couple of them for me. How about for you?
Since I haven't followed that much, I don't really have an answer for that, because I think at least you should have followed the team at least 10, 15 years to really answer that kind of a thing. So I don't have a real answer for that. And the second part of the question is real quick. Any player that you think underachieved? For example, even though I have never watched Michael Vick when he was playing, but I have watched so many YouTube videos and I felt like, oh man, Michael Vick should have been a Hall of Famer. So any player in 49ers that you thought should have achieved more, but for some reason, again, faded away?
There's a lot of them, throughout the years. Andre Carter was a pretty good defensive pass rusher at one point, but he was never really a superstar. That'd be one of them. Shoot, that's a little bit of a tougher question. You start to just, there's just so many names, but even in closer times, let's just go to more recent times. You've got Dante Pettis, for example. Dante Pettis was the guy who, when you watched him play in college and the things that he was able to do on the field, with the kick returns and everything, and then you actually put him out to return kicks in the NFL, and just the difference in the level of play for a guy like Dante was disappointing. Solomon Thomas, I think people expected that with him. So that's a little bit tougher one on the players. When you look at that, probably the biggest bust that I can think of, going back to the old days, like the Bill Walsh days, would be it was a linebacker by the name of Todd Shell. They drafted him in the first round, like in mid 80s, like 86, 87. It wasn't 86, so they didn't have a first-round pick. It might have been 87 or just after that. And he was a guy who really never did anything with the 49ers. Went on to have a successful career as a head coach in the Arena Football League. But as a player in the NFL, he never really hit on anything very much there. So, unfortunately, it's tough on that one. The other one would be, it's interesting. And I'm not going to say this guy was a bust or a real disappointment, but it was a disappointment that William Floyd didn't last longer than he did as a 49er, because he was a rookie on that 94 team and was just so good his rookie year, and he really fell off, down the line after that first season. I don't think they've really re-signed him to a second contract, so that'd be another one for me.
Okay. Thank you very much. I ask these questions because it brings a lot of knowledge and memory into the picture. So I love hearing these stories just to learn.
Yeah, but you got to remember, I became a 49er fan. I'm 47, so I'm old. I'm an old guy. So the first game, the first 49er game I ever went to was in 1980. So I was about 6 years old, and it happened to be the game that Joe Montana brought the team back against the Saints, the one that they were down 30. I think it was 35-7 at the half. They won 38-35. So that was my first ever game as a 49er fan. I was lucky enough to go to a couple games in '81. I was there, watched them lose against the Browns on a rainy day, and our seats were up at the top of the stadium. And if you've ever been at Candlestick Park, or if you ever had the luck, if you were up at the top, but you were by the press box, you could only see half the field. And when my parents bought the tickets, they didn't realize that. My mom got angry, and she wrote a letter to Eddie Bartolo and everything talking about it. And then the other one was the later on in the season against the Giants when they clinched the NFC West division. We were at that game as well and got to run out on the field and get involved with the group of fans that were that had Ronnie Lott on their shoulders. Had a big piece of the Candlestick turf for quite a while. So in a pizza box in our garage. So just really good times. And I had season tickets for the 49ers, started from 1985 to 2003. That was the last year that I had them. So yeah, so that's just a little bit of my history with them. So if you want to ever talk about old 49er stuff or hear stories of the glory days of the 49ers, I think I could give you at least some of the things that I remember, from back then.
Okay, thanks a lot for sharing those memories.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And anything else you want to share?
No, that's it. I just wanted to ask those questions.
No, that's great. Hey, I appreciate you jumping on. Thanks very much, and great call again.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Varuna is one of those guys, and there's a lot of you guys that I see over in the comment section, all the time. And Varuna is one of them, and he whether it's my show or Jesse or Grant or East Bay last night, he's always one of those guys to jump in and help out, and really appreciate all of you that join and follow along with us and allow us to do what we do. It's an honor to be able to do that. Let me go over here. Jason over here asks, what are the thoughts on Scangarello? Do you think he is a good QB coach, and can he actually coach up Lance and Rosen if Rosen makes a team? Well, here's the thing with Scangarello. He struggled when he went out on his own the last couple of years. He was with, if you recall, 2019, he was the offensive coordinator with the Broncos. Last year, he was with the Eagles, and he struggled in both those roles. But as a quarterback coach under Kyle Shanahan, Scangarello has done a pretty good job. He's the guy who really had to get Jimmy Garoppolo up and running back in 2017 when he joined the team. So, I think he does a pretty good job. I think he's an interesting character, very good as far as what the 49ers ask him to do. So I would look I think he's better than Shane Day. So I'm looking for some improvement there. I definitely think he can coach up Josh Rosen and Trey Lance. If you heard the conversation last Thursday with Trey Lance's QB coach, he kind of mentioned Scangarello as well as a guy who knows what he's doing. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. And I'm going to say for me that I do think that Scangarello can make a difference, and that he can do it. He help the Lance come up to speed, and Rosen as well. Let's give. We're going to go to Nick. We're going to give Nick another shot. Let's see if the audio is a little bit better. How you doing?
Can you hear me now, Jack?
Oh, there we go. So much better. The first time, every time you talked or I talked, we sounded like the chipmunks back and forth. I was like, I was Simon, you were Theodore. We were arguing back and forth with our chipmunk voices. But we're good now.
I've never been able to use this camera or mic, and I've never even attached myself to any of the programs to try to speak to you. 20 minutes ago, I said, I'll try to see if I can connect with Jack, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and it's working. We had some difficulties, and you figured it out. I really appreciate you jumping on. What was it you wanted to chat about a little bit?
Well, obviously, we're all frustrated with the injuries. I mean, it makes you crazy. You invest all this time into following the draft and then building the team, and then they get hurt. Not even in training camp. I mean, we're not even into training camp yet. It's crazy. Yeah,
they're just running around in shorts and t-shirts. At this point, right? Maybe they might have their helmets on, but there's not even any contact. And the amount of injuries that they've dealt with already. You've got the Achilles and the knee. Yesterday, and then poor Jeff Wilson. He's working out and sits down on the bench and stands up and he tears a meniscus in his knee. So it's rough. It's a tough situation, I think, for the 49ers. I'd like to blame it on somebody, and I'm not sure if we can do that.
No, I know. I was listening to Grant today, Grant Cohn, obviously, and he's speculating that it's the way, the intensity of the way they practice. It's the way they've schemed up how they practice and how they get guys ready. And it's amazing that nobody has scouted other teams to see what their workout schedules are, to kind of try to compare and contrast the results, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting there is that they do have quite a few new guys on their coaching staff this year who have been elsewhere. They have brought on some new defensive guys to help D'Amico Ryans, and so they hopefully have some input as to some of the things that they've done with their teams prior to coming over to the 49ers. Even the guy we were just talking about, Scangarello, who he's been with Denver and with Philly the last 2 years, and he's back. And so you'd hope that at least there's been some conversations about, hey, here's what we've done here, and that's allowed us to stay healthy. It's a frustrating situation, and I think some of it has to do with the guys they're drafting and bringing in, and some of it just obviously has to do with bad luck. And I don't know if you saw this. I had tweeted this out, and I heard Grant mention it as well on his show earlier today on the Cone Phone. But the other part of it is these guys are just so big and so strong and so fast that they're just creating so much torque on their bodies as they're doing these movements that, think of it like your car, right? When you're driving your car is usually going to break down at the weakest point, right? That there's one part of the car that just is kind of the weak link in the car that could cause it to break. And in our bodies, it seems, you've got these guys that are big muscled up guys, and the weak spot in their bodies is their tendons. And that's what see the Achilles injury, the ligaments in the knees, those kind of things. So
it's weird though, because you'd think you'd see it across the league, right? It wouldn't be so isolated to a couple of teams, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I do think you're seeing a lot more. We're seeing a lot more, of these injuries across the league. But you're right. It seems like the 49ers are having it more than everybody. Well, obviously they're having it more than everybody else, because if you go back, since 2014 to now, they've been at the in the bottom third of the league pretty much every year when it comes to the amount of games that are lost due to injury. So there's definitely something in the 49ers, the way that I think they're bringing on players, and the way that they're getting them built up that is playing into it. One thing that I took a look at earlier today, because I wanted to, as I was going through and trying to come up with a possible reason for it, I mentioned earlier the whole Scott McCloughan thing and so on. But, the 49ers, everybody talks about the training staff. The training staff is the problem and whatnot. So I went back and I looked, and from 2001, there was one guy that was with the team from 2008 until I think it was right around 2014, and that was Mark Uyeyama. And you might remember seeing him on the sidelines during the Harbaugh tenure. He was the one that usually worked the guys out with. They were doing like the karate stuff and things like that before the games. Anyway, he had been with the 49ers in the early days of the McCloughan regime, and after McCloughan transitioned out, you started to see the injuries kind of start to creep up in 2013, even under his watch. So I guess it's a long way for me to say, it's really about the guys that they're bringing in more than it's the guys that they're bringing in, and is really, for me, the area that I'm going to point to is to be the reason why they're having so much problems compared to everybody else.
Hey, Jack, who do you think's more likely to make the team as a wideout, Kevin White or Jauan Jennings?
That's a good question, and I like that one. I'm going to say Jauan Jennings. Jauan Jennings is the guy that they drafted last year, who from the reports of the two practices reporters have been able to see so far, it's only been two, but he's looked improved, at least so far in OTAs. And if he can carry that through, he's a guy who I think could make the team, as your fifth or sixth receiver, because he's going to have the ability to play special teams. He's going to be able to be a guy that I think you can see him being a gunner or something like that on punt or kickoff, going down and be a coverage guy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Kevin White was more of a speed, height kind of guy, whereas Jauan Jennings was a 50-50 ball guy. He was more of a physical receiver, a guy who went up and took the ball away and would bully people. So they are kind of very different if you think about it.
Yeah, they are. But for me, I look at it as a receiver. I think White hasn't really been able to do anything at the NFL level yet, right? He's really struggled in his previous stops. So on the special teams, what he gives you is pretty much just as a return guy, if anything, on special teams. But I think Travis Benjamin gives you that as well. So those three guys are all going to be kind of in the mix. So when I put my list out yesterday, I included Jennings as one of them, and it was Ayuk and Samuel, obviously. Richie James Jr. was also on that list. I included Jalen Hurd. That's all based on his health. If he's healthy, Jalen Hurd's going to make this roster. So that leaves you with 2 spots, and I went with Jennings and Benjamin. And Jennings and Benjamin make it because of their ability to play receiver, but what they bring on special teams as well. I think Jennings can be a cover guy, whereas Benjamin can be a returner. So that's why I stick with both of those. And Benjamin has history with Shanahan as well. He was pretty good with him during his time in Cleveland. So that's the 6 that I came up with.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, like Kevin White showed the ability. In college, he was really good, but he just hasn't really stepped up in the NFL at all at any of his stops up until now. And I think he spent all of last year off the roster as well. So,
Jack, do you read anything into the fact that we haven't seen Jalen Hurd yet anywhere near the field?
He's a guy who, what you've heard, and Shanahan's mentioned about wanting to bring guys along slowly. So with especially a guy like Hurd, who's been injured as much as he has, it makes sense for them to really try to keep him off of the main field and kind of work over with the trainers and working him in slowly. With him, you really want him to be where once August rolls around, he can start to ramp up and get more involved with the team and be ready at that point. So his body's ready for the hitting and things like that's going to have to go through. So if I'm reading into the situation, I'm thinking that it's just because they're bringing him along slowly because they want him to be able to compete in August. Yeah.
And maybe D Ford, but I don't know if that's really pie in the sky dreaming.
Well, and I think it is, I would say there's a part of it that's pie in the sky, right? But they have him on the team. If they're able to get anything out of him, even if it's only 50 snaps, if he can play 50 snaps at the end of the season, say week 16, 17, and they're in the middle of a playoff chase and he's able to come in and take some snaps at the end of the season, that's a win-win. And, well, Runa was asking me about some stuff in 49ers history, right? You go back to, I think it was 97 when the 49ers finally beat the Packers, or is it 98? I think it was. When they finally beat the Packers anyway in that wild card game, they had signed Charles Haley off the street, if you remember, like Thursday before the game. He hadn't played a game all season long, and they signed him off the street. He went on the field, and then they put him out there for like 10 or 12 snaps in that game against Green Bay, and actually, did a good job at times of making Favre move around. So if he's going to be a guy that they have around, and if they're able to keep a spot for him or whatever, if they get anything out of him, that's as you said, pie in the sky. That's just gravy on top of everything else.
Well, if we get a healthy Bosa and Armstead, do you think Arden Key or Kevin Givens or Ebicom can be our third punch? Like, can one of those guys step up and kind of be a second-rate D Ford?
I think that that's what they're going to be able to get out of Ebicom. I think Ebicom is the guy they're expecting that kind of play out of. He was the speed rusher, the guy coming off the other end. The biggest thing with him really is he doesn't have a lot of moves. He's just a high motor guy, and he does a really good job of. He's very physical, and so I can easily see him being the guy that's going to allow. It's all about allowing Armstead to kick inside, right? You want Armstead to be rushing the passer from that tackle position instead of the defensive end. Ebicom gives you that, and he's been healthy throughout his career, and so that's going to be your primary guy. It'll be interesting to see what they do over. They have Bosa's going to be. He's going to do his job. He's going to be good off the right side. It'll be interesting to see because we don't know how they're going to rotate guys out yet. Arden Key. We don't know what he has. It'll be interesting to see because that was the one thing with Ronald Blair. early in 2019 is he was the guy that came on and gave Bosa the breaths every once in a while when he needed that. And they didn't have that last year, and then Bosa was out anyway. So I think Ebukam is the guy that you're asking about, though. He's going to be the guy that's going to be your D4 replacement. And I would expect him to be a big help for the 49ers defensive line.
I also think that they've been pretty hard on Kinlaw. I think people forget, without Bosa and a bunch of other hurt players on the D line, Kinlaw didn't really have time to develop in training camp. I thought for as raw as he was thrown out there for season 1, he played well, and I think he's going to make a huge jump, just like D'Amico Ryan said.
Yeah, and the other thing too with Kinlaw is the fact that he gets to go through the offseason program. I think that's the other big part about that too. They didn't have that last year, so he's able to come in and he's able to be with the team, through OTAs, and he's going. He's going to have that work with the guys before they get into training camp. So all that, I think, is going to play into him hopefully having a better season. It'll be interesting. I don't think he's going to. I don't think we'll see how it goes. I don't think that he is necessarily the pass rushing threat that DeForest Buckner was. DeForest Buckner was tremendous inside, so that's a rough call to put on him. But he's going to be. I think he'll do fine. I think we're going to see improvement from him. Expecting him to finish the season with 6+ sacks, I think that's unrealistic. But if we can see him get 4 or 5 and get constant pressure up the middle, that's what I would like to see out of him. There's just constant pressure up the middle, and if he can develop a move or two outside of the bull rush, that's going to help his pass rush very much.
I agree. I think he can also flush the quarterback toward Bosa or Arden Key or Ebukam, whoever's on the edges.
Yeah, and Armstead as well, right? Because Armstead, if he's out there in that nickel situation where he might not be, but if he's out there in a pass rushing situation, you got Armstead right there to help out as well too. So, I think him and Givens inside really help them out too in base downs. So. It's going to be it's great. Don't forget about DJ Jones. He's a guy who's really good inside, and he's kind of the forgotten guy out of that group. He's very good, and especially for a guy his size to be able to chase down these quarterbacks and whatnot. So there's some definite things to like about the 49ers and their depth up front. So it'll be fun to watch how that group comes together in August.
Yeah, now we're back to health. Hopefully we can just stay healthy.
Right. Stay healthy. Biggest one, like I was kind of saying before the call started coming on, is the quarterback spot. If the 49ers can keep Garoppolo and healthy, I think that's going to be a huge plus. And then on top of that, Trey Lance, if Trey Lance wins the job. Either way, however this works out, if those two guys stay on the roster, and I think the 49ers are in a much better position than they were in 2020.
Well, thanks so much, Jack. I appreciate your analysis.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you jumping on. You had some really good questions, and it was a really good call. Anytime.
Well, this is the first time I've spoken to anybody on YouTube, so it's been a treat.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And we're going to do this every Tuesday night, even when the season starts. So don't be afraid to jump on with me anytime.
Cool. I'll get my camera and my sound worked out.
There you go. Thank you very much, Nick. Have a good night.
Take care, Jack.
All right. That was a really good call. Nick had some really good points and some good questions for me. Just one over here real quick. Ray asked, did Tavares Moore and Justin School have any injury history that were major injuries? And I don't think they really did. That's, when you go through the injuries, those are two guys who I don't think really have a history of injuries in their past. I'd have to go back and really look at it. But I think School was healthy throughout his entire time at I think he came from Vanderbilt, and Moore was as well. So, it's just a tough one. Those were some tough injuries, but yeah. And then Graham jumps in. DJ Jones's rundown of the Panthers QB in 19 was amazing. Yeah, and even if you recall the Seahawks game, which was the game that he got injured in, was the Seahawks game at Levi's. He had chased down Russell Wilson for a sack, and I think that might have even been the play that injured him. So 49ers have a really good group up front on defense, and that's really something that maybe we should talk about next week. Maybe we should do a little bit of studying and come back next week and say who we think our guys are going to be up front and how this defensive line is going to be able to mesh and gel. Because there's a lot of interesting names and players with different abilities out there that they're going to make that 49er pass rush and 49ers defensive front really good for the 2021 season, or at least has the ability to. It seems like so. If there's not any other questions or calls, I'm going to go ahead and jump off. I've held you guys for about an hour. I really appreciate everybody that joined. The comment section was really good as well. You guys had some really good questions over there, and I really appreciate all that. I appreciate those of you that took the time to call. For those of you that are in the comment section that aren't quite sure if you want to call in, a couple of things. Just do it, because I'm not gonna do anything to try to make you feel bad. I'm here to support you. I want to hear your voice. I want you guys to have the opportunity to come in and talk your 49ers the way that you want to do it. Ask your questions that you want to ask. If it's a situation you don't want to necessarily, be on camera, there's the option to go on there, and I can bring you up, and you just stop your camera, and it just has a little circle there. And then we can hear you. Be like the old days back on KMBR radio out here in the Bay Area, where when they actually had people that could call in and give their questions. You'd come in and say, "Hey, this is Ray. Here's my question," and I'm going to jump off. And at least that just kind of keeps the flow going. So whatever it takes, whatever you guys are comfortable with, I appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody joining tonight. We'll be back next Tuesday. Every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, we're going to do this. And originally, I know last week it was at 7. But our buddy East Bay, Chris, he has his show at 7. So trying to not get in anybody's way and give everybody the full space for their platform to shine, and especially the guys that I work with and communicate with the most want to make sure that we all have our time. And I know he and Jesse are getting over there and going to be doing a good job here. They probably already started already. So I appreciate it. Thank you guys for the kind words in the comment section, Jason and Harold. And we'll be back at you next Tuesday at 6 o'clock with more Niner chatter. Until then, have a great night, everybody. And don't forget, Hammer Nail Show coming up at you on Thursday night at 6:30 on my channel. And we've got a special guest that'll be joining us. So see y'all then, and have a great night, everybody. Thank you.